Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are undertaking, well, a really monumental deep dive into the life of a figure who didn't just capture global attention. She fundamentally redefined what it meant to be royal in the modern era. Diana, Princess of Wales.
Absolutely. We're looking at her not just as this tragic royal figure, but really as an international phenomenon, an activist whose short life and enduring legacy permanently shifted the whole balance, between the monarchy and the media.
We really did.
And the sources we have, gosh, there are so many. Personal accounts, official biographies, journalistic exposés, public records. They paint this really intense portrait of paradox. You have the shy noblewoman who becomes arguably the most photographed woman in the world.
That paradox is exactly what makes her story so compelling, isn't it? Our mission today is really to move beyond those sensational tabloid headlines and try to understand, using the facts we've got from our source material, how Diana evolved, how she went from this relatively unknown aristocratic girl into, well, the global force that Tony Blair famously called the People's Princess. We want a thorough, clear understanding of her profound influence.
Indeed. We are tracking a life lived at, full throttle. Born Diana Frances Spencer in 1961, she was, of course, the first wife of Charles III, the devoted mother of Princes William and Harry. And she died so young, age 36, in that terrible crash in 1997.
It's hard to believe it's been that long.
It is. Her charisma, her struggles, her glamour, and her unwavering focus on humanitarian work that really defined her time in the spotlight. So let's unpack the roots of that remarkable, yet, deeply troubled personality.
Okay, to do that, we absolutely have to start right at the beginning. Let's jump into part one, early life and her sort of non-traditional path to the palace. Now, the Spencer name carries some serious weight in British history, doesn't it? What was the context of her entry into the world?
Well, the context was pure British nobility, top tier. But internally, things were messy. The Spencer family was, intimately connected to the royal household for generations. Her grandmothers both served as ladies-in-waiting to the Queen Mother. And Diana herself was born at Park House, which is literally right there on the Sandringham estate. It just reinforces that tight, almost sort of feudal connection to the very core of the monarchy.
So she was basically born next door to the crown. Literally. Yet, despite this, high society pedigree, her childhood was marked by really deep instability. Our sources suggest there was immense disappointment when she was born.
Yeah, that's right.
Primarily because her parents had desperately hoped for a boy to secure the family lineage. And that pressure only intensified after the death of her infant brother John, just before she was born.
That parental strain, it just became too much. Her parents divorced when Diana was only 7. She later described her childhood as very unhappy and very unstable. This profound family fracturing obviously left deep emotional scars.
It must have.
Her younger brother, Charles Spencer, has described the whole thing as dreadful and likely, a root cause of their subsequent emotional struggles.
And that background, that sort of emotional volatility, it became even more visible after her father remarried in 1976, didn't it? To Reine, Countess of Dartmouth.
Oh, yes. Diana's immediate hostility toward her stepmother, Reine, whom she famously called a bully, it's really well documented, including that, astonishing anecdote where Diana reportedly pushed Reine down the stairs during an argument.
Pushed her down the stairs.
Apparently so. It's shocking, right? And it speaks volumes, I think, about the level of maybe uncontrolled emotional reaction just simmering beneath that polite aristocratic facade.
Yeah.
It's an incident that kind of foreshadows the intensity of her internal struggles later on and the difficulty she had containing her emotions within, restrictive environments like the palace.
It really does. This unstable home life, contrasted with the rigid expectations of her class, it seems to have led her down a surprisingly non-traditional academic path, especially for a future royal spouse.
Absolutely. Academics just weren't her strong suit. She failed her O-levels twice, left Westheath Girls' School at 16. That's quite an unconventional path for someone who would eventually marry the future king.
Definitely not the usual route.
No. And her brother recalls her being incredibly shy during this period, despite her, aristocratic lineage.
But she certainly wasn't without talent. We see this strong, creative, and physical intelligence sort of emerging. She excelled in swimming and diving. She was an accomplished pianist, and she trained in ballet and tap dance.
Right. These are activities that require discipline, expression, commitment, a different kind of focus, maybe, than she found in formal schooling.
And that desire for a non-traditional existence, it seems to have manifested in her work before the engagement. After coming back from a Swiss finishing school, she took on genuinely low-paying jobs in London.
She really did. She was a dance instructor for a bit until a skiing accident sidelined her. She did cleaning work, believe it or not, and she worked as a nursery teacher's assistant at the Young England School in Pimlico.
And that nursery job, that's so crucial to her narrative, isn't it?
It really is.
She was the first royal bride to the heir apparent who had ever held a proper, consistent paying job before marriage. It immediately gave the press and the public something relatable to latch onto, didn't it? Something that hinted at a non-gilded existence, even though her roots were pure blue blood.
Exactly. It helped cement that image of the sort of commoner who caught the prince, even though, as you say, she was far from a commoner. The courtship itself, well, it was a whirlwind.
How did it start?
She actually first met Charles way back in 1977. She was only 16, and he was 29, dating her older sister, Sarah, at the time.
Oh, right, her sister.
Yeah. The dynamic really shifted in the summer of 1980. They were at a weekend gathering in the country. Their paths crossed again, and things just clicked.
And the relationship accelerated pretty rapidly after that weekend, leading to the critical invitation to Balmoral, the ultimate royal test, basically.
That's right, the Balmoral test. Our sources confirm she was well received by the entire inner circle, the Queen, Prince Philip, the Queen Mother. That signaled official approval. And Charles proposed not long after, on February 6, 1981, at Windsor Castle. They kept it secret for about 2.5 weeks.
And right there, even before the world knew, Diana gave us this little insight into her future independence streak, didn't she?
How so?
She chose her own engagement ring from a Garrard catalog rather than accepting a custom piece or a family heirloom.
Ah, yes, the sapphire and diamond cluster. It was a choice, wasn't it? It sort of symbolized a new kind of royal bride, someone who maybe prioritized personal preference over pure tradition, even then.
Exactly, a little hint of what was to come.
That choice was perhaps the first small step in a whole series of steps away from protocol that would really define her brief and ultimately tumultuous tenure as the Princess of Wales.
Which moves us perfectly into part 2. The fairy tale fates marriage, public exposure, and eventually divorce. The wedding itself was magnificent, wasn't it? Held at St. Paul's Cathedral, July 1981, chosen specifically for its sheer capacity, allowing for this huge, grand spectacle.
Oh, the scale was immense, and the global reaction, Diana Mania, it was instantaneous. An estimated 750 million people watched worldwide. It was marketed globally as the fairy tale wedding.
750 million people. Just staggering.
It really is.
Yeah.
But what's interesting, I think, is that even amidst the vows, right there in the ceremony, she was already pushing back subtly against the establishment.
She certainly did. There was a small matter of her inadvertently reversing Charles's first 2 names during the vows.
Yeah, yes, a little slip.
But the major, really comment-worthy deviation was that she and Charles together chose to omit the traditional vow where the bride promised to obey her husband.
That was significant.
For a 20-year-old marrying the heir to the throne, that was a very overt, highly visible declaration of, well, perhaps equality or at least partnership.
It's definitely a statement. Yet, behind the scenes, the private reality seems to have been crushing almost immediately. She became the Princess of Wales at just 20, facing instant, immense global pressure.
Then it showed quite quickly, didn't it?
It did. Her struggle was so intense that by 1983, during a royal tour to Canada, she was already confiding in Brian Peckford, the Premier of Newfoundland at the time. She told him she was finding it very difficult to cope with the pressures, just 2 years in.
And that difficulty, it manifested internally with, well, horrific clarity. She suffered profoundly from postpartum depression after William's birth in 1982.
Yes, which was not widely understood or discussed back then.
Not at all. But the most chilling detail, revealed much later in tapes she recorded, was her confession that she'd intentionally thrown herself down a flight of stairs while pregnant with William.
It's just awful to contemplate. She said she felt so inadequate and was desperate for attention, a cry for help, that she felt the palace, the system, was completely ignoring.
That level of psychological distress is just staggering. It speaks to the profound loneliness she must have felt inside that gilded cage. And she also struggled intensely with bulimia nervosa and engaged in self-harm.
Yes, and it's important to note, as the sources do, that biographers frequently cite these struggles, the emotional volatility, the self-harm, the perhaps compulsive behaviors as potential indicators of something like borderline personality disorder. It reflects a personality that really struggled to stabilize under that intense, unrelenting spotlight.
It's a complex picture, But the silver lining, if you can call it that, in that immense struggle was her absolute dedication to her children. She fundamentally altered the tradition of royal parenting.
That's where her resolve truly shone, wasn't it? She was intransigent on this. She chose their names, William and Harry. She chose their schools. She famously dismissed the traditional royal nannies for staff she handpicked herself.
And she structured her public duties around their timetables, didn't she?
Completely. She made sure William and Harry had experiences far beyond the usual royal bubble, like those private visits she took them on to homeless shelters and hospitals. She was determined to keep them grounded, to give them a glimpse of, real life.
Despite that dedication, the marriage itself was visibly crumbling pretty quickly. Due to, well, fundamental incompatibility, that significant 13-year age difference.
Yeah, all of it. By 1986, just 5 years in, their mutual unhappiness was so stark, so obvious, that the media had already dubbed them the Glums. You'd see these photos of them looking utterly miserable together.
The Glums, I remember that.
And 1986 really marks the point of no return, it seems. Charles, disillusioned, rekindled his long-standing relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles. And almost simultaneously, Diana began her own serious affair with James Hewitt, the family's writing instructor. The marital lines were irrevocably broken by them.
And the pressure cooker finally blew in 1989, didn't it? When Diana famously confronted Camilla Parker Bowles at a private birthday party. That confrontation became the stuff of legend almost instantly.
It did, a very direct move. But the real war moved decisively into the public sphere in 1992.
1992. The Queen called it her annus horribilis,
Right.
her horrible year.
And for good reason. Andrew Morton's explosive book, Diana, her true story, was released. It revealed Diana's bulimia, her deep unhappiness, her suicide attempts, and the existence of extramarital affairs. It was a bombshell.
And it became an even bigger scandal when it was later revealed that Diana herself had secretly provided the material for the book, hadn't she? Through recorded tapes delivered via a third party, James Coulthurst.
Exactly. She was actively collaborating, fighting back, using the media, and the tapes just kept coming. The infamous Squidgygate tapes featuring an intimate phone call between Diana and James Gilby were leaked that same year.
Huge embarrassment.
But arguably, the truly damaging public humiliation came with the Camillagate or Tampongate tapes in 1993.
Oh, that was something else.
It really was. They contained this intensely intimate, frankly vulgar, and just shocking phone conversation between Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles, recorded years earlier but leaked then.
Tampongate was seismic, wasn't it? The sheer detail of their longing for each other, the really crude language, it just destroyed any remaining pretense of dignity the palace was trying to project.
Absolutely. The public was reading raw, intimate transcripts involving their future king. It was an unprecedented violation of privacy and a massive, massive constitutional embarrassment.
And all this public exposure only seemed to fuel Diana's private fears and her desire for maybe an escape hatch.
It seems so. She confessed on videotape to her voice coach, Peter Settle, tapes that also emerged later, that she had been deeply in love with her bodyguard, Barry Manicky, between 1984 and 1986.
Manicky, right?
Yeah. She even stated she was quite happy to give all this up royal life just to go off and live with him. It shows a real depth of feeling, or perhaps desperation.
Such vulnerability in that statement. Manicky was moved from her protection detail in '86 after suspicions arose about their closeness, wasn't he?
He was chucked out, as Diana put it. And then he died in a motorcycle accident shortly after, in 1987. Diana became convinced, or at least expressed the suspicion, that he was killed deliberately. This fed into her growing sense of paranoia and feeling unsafe within the palace walls.
And that paranoia reached this really chilling climax in October 1993. She wrote a note to her butler, Paul Burrell.
The infamous Burrell note.
Alleging that Charles was actively planning an accident for her, specifically involving brake failure and serious head injury, so he could marry Tiggy Legberg, who was then his personal assistant and nanny to the princess.
Whether those fears were based in reality or were a product of her isolation and perhaps paranoia, the fact that she believed this and wrote it down profoundly suggests the level of danger and betrayal she felt surrounded by.
It's a very dark place to be. And this dark internal atmosphere provided the backdrop for Charles's own big TV interview in 1994 with Jonathan Dimbleby.
Right, where he admitted resuming his relationship with Camilla, but only, he insisted, after his marriage to Diana had irretrievably broken down. It was his attempt to control the narrative.
But Diana wasn't having it. And that set the stage for her ultimate mic drop moment.
Yeah.
The 1995 BBC Panorama interview with Martin Bashir.
Oh, that was the absolute tipping point. A self-inflicted wound on the monarchy, really, orchestrated by Diana. She dropped that instantly unforgettable line about the marriage. Well, there were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded.
Instantly iconic.
And she spoke with shocking openness about her bulimia, her depression, her self-harm. She masterfully used her vulnerability to gain global sympathy and position herself not just as a victim of the press, but as a victim of the palace establishment itself.
But a huge shadow hangs over that interview now, doesn't it?
A massive one. We now know, thanks to inquiries, that the journalist Martin Bashir used deceitful methods, including forged bank statements, and actively played on Diana's paranoia, suggesting people close to her were spying on her, specifically to secure that interview.
It's quite damning.
It is, and the source material reveals that both William and Harry concluded years later that the unethical way the interview was obtained and the interview itself directly contributed to the breakdown of their parents' relationship, the divorce, and ultimately, they believe, played a part in the circumstances leading to her death.
Wow. That's a heavy conclusion from her own sons.
Very heavy. The fallout was swift. The Queen advised Charles and Diana to divorce in December 1995, just weeks after the interview aired. The divorce was finalized in August 1996. The negotiation was complex, but the emotional cost was perhaps most visible in the handling of her title.
Right. She lost the official style, Her Royal Highness, the HRH, but she retained the title Diana, Princess of Wales.
That distinction, while seeming maybe small to outsiders, meant everything within that world. It defined her remaining somewhat ambiguous links to the institution, and it led to that incredibly poignant, almost heartbreaking promise from young Prince William.
Oh, what was that?
He reportedly told her after she lost the HRH something like, "Don't worry, Mummy, I will give it back to you one day when I am king." Oh, bless him. Wow.
Shows the depth of his feeling even then. Post-divorce, Diana fought hard to maintain her independence while still leveraging her unique status. She kept her apartment at Kensington Palace, she retained access to royal air travel, and her amazing collection of jewels.
But crucially, she made a decision about security, didn't she?
Yes, she refused Metropolitan Police protection in her final years. She reportedly felt it was a measure of control used by the royal family or the firm, and she wanted absolute distance and freedom from that.
A decision with obviously tragic consequences later on. She was also actively trying to redefine her public life, wasn't she, beyond just charity work?
She was. She was engaging in talks with the then new Prime Minister, Tony Blair, about potentially taking on a special sort of non-royal ambassadorial role, promoting Britain's interests overseas. She was clearly carving out an independent, influential platform for herself, totally outside the constraints of official court duty.
And her personal life reflected this desire for, well, normal freedom perhaps, an intense connection.
Absolutely. She maintained a highly secretive, very serious relationship with the British-Pakistani heart surgeon Hasnat Khan. Friends have referred to him as the love of her life and her Mr. Wonderful.
It's a very private relationship.
Incredibly so, given her fame. It lasted nearly 2 years, apparently very intense, until it ended rather abruptly in the summer of 1997. Sources suggest her mother, Frances Shan Kidd, strongly disapproved of her relationship with a Muslim man, leading to a profound and lasting rift between Diana and her mother.
That's sad. And it was just a month after that devastating breakup with Khan that she began dating Dodi Fayed, the son of the Harrods owner, Mohammed Al-Fayed.
Yes, and the sources reveal a sort of practical, almost reactive reason for this choice initially. She had intended to take William and Harry to the Hamptons in New York that summer, but was apparently prevented by security concerns.
So Fayed offered an alternative.
He did. She accepted Dodi's father, Mohammed Al-Fayed's, invitation to join them at his massive, securely guarded compound in the south of France, because it offered a kind of sanctuary, a level of private security that British royal protection officials wouldn't object to for the princes. So, ironically, she was seeking privacy and security, but ended up under the most intense paparazzi scrutiny imaginable.
A terrible irony. This push for self-determination, both personally and through her work, brings us neatly to part 3. The humanitarian dynamo redefining royal duty.
Yes, and this is the part of her legacy that remains, I think, unquestionably positive and deeply effective. Diana was celebrated precisely because she rejected those traditional, often quite staid, royal patronages. She consciously moved her focus to serious, often stigmatized issues, things like AIDS, leprosy, homelessness, and landmines.
She wasn't just lending her name either, was she?
Not at all. The scope of her work was relentless. In 1991 alone, she carried out 397 official engagements. That demonstrates a massive capacity for work and genuine engagement. Her impact on global charity fundraising was so significant that the director of the UK Institute of Charity Fundraising Managers claimed her effect was more significant than any other person's in the 20th century.
That's a huge statement.
It's not hyperbole. It reflects a quantifiable impact. She brought visibility and funds to causes that desperately needed them.
And her pioneering work in championing the AIDS cause, particularly in the mid to late 80s, remains arguably her defining humanitarian moment.
I'd agree. In 1987, right at the height of the AIDS crisis, when public fear, ignorance, and misinformation were absolutely rampant, she visited a London hospital, the Middlesex Hospital, and famously shook the hand of a man suffering from AIDS without gloves.
Such a simple gesture, but revolutionary at the time.
Completely. That physical contact, being the first British royal to do it so publicly, was revolutionary. It actively and visually debunked the terrifying widespread myth that the disease could be transmitted by casual touch. The images went global and instantly started breaking down massive barriers of stigma and fear.
And her quote from that time is still so powerful, isn't it? HIV does not make people dangerous to know. You can shake their hands and give them a hug. Heaven knows they need it.
It perfectly captured her empathetic approach. That work earned her recognition like Time magazine's Woman of the Year in 1987. And later, Nelson Mandela himself, another huge moral authority, praised her specifically for transforming public attitudes toward the disease. Her influence truly transcended borders and politics.
And that courage, that willingness to tackle tough issues, transferred directly to her high-risk activism with the Global Landmines campaign in 1997. This arguably brought her into the most direct political conflict with the British establishment.
Indeed. Those iconic pictures of her in Angola walking through a partially cleared minefield, wearing a ballistic helmet and a flak jacket, they were incredibly potent. She was intentionally using her unparalleled celebrity to force the world to pay attention to a deadly, insidious, invisible killer.
But she wasn't just posing for photos, was she?
No, she was actively campaigning for an international ban, which drew intense political heat back home.
The political backlash was pretty swift and fierce, as I recall. She was criticized for meddling in politics, wasn't she?
Oh.
And infamously called a loose cannon by conservative junior defense minister Earl Howe.
Yes, that loose cannon comment stuck. It was a clear sign that parts of the establishment saw her activism as a direct constitutional threat. She was using her celebrity platform to influence foreign policy, completely outside of official government channels. They didn't like that one bit.
Yet, the tangible results of her efforts really speak for themselves, don't they?
They absolutely do. Her high-profile awareness campaign was instrumental, many believe, in building momentum towards the Ottawa Treaty later that same year, 1997, which brought about the international ban on the production and use of anti-personnel landmines.
And the international campaign to ban landmines actually won the Nobel Peace Prize that year, too.
Exactly. A massive recognition of the gravity and impact of the cause she had so powerfully championed just months before her death.
Beyond these huge global issues, she maintained a steadfast focus on the vulnerable closer to home as well. She became patron of the leprosy mission.
Yes, and again, she made a point of deliberately touching those afflicted by leprosy, reinforcing her message that they are not reviled, that they deserve compassion and human contact, challenging centuries of stigma.
Her focus also extended strongly to mental illness and homelessness, areas that often suffered from severe public neglect and misunderstanding.
That's right. She was a longtime, very active supporter of Centerpoint, the youth homelessness charity, and she famously took William and Harry on those private, unpublicized visits to homeless shelters, ensuring they understood poverty and vulnerability firsthand. She argued passionately that society had a duty to ensure young people are given the chance they deserve.
And her specific, often intense patronages, like being president of the Royal Marsden Hospital, which focuses on cancer research, or visiting psychiatric facilities like Broadmoor, gave her this perfect platform. She could bring legitimacy, funding, and huge visibility to issues that were often deliberately kept hidden from public view.
She really did create a new, modern campaigning model for royal duty. Less ribbon cutting, more direct engagement with difficult realities.
The contrast between her incredible public success in this humanitarian work in Part 3 and the tragic personal turmoil we discussed in Part 2, it's just so jarring. And that contrast ultimately defined her end, didn't it? Which brings us to Part 4, the tragic end and her enduring legacy.
It does. The context of her death remains absolutely crucial to understanding her legacy. She died, as we know, on August 31st, 1997, after that devastating car crash in the Pont de l'Alma tunnel in
And
Paris.
the circumstances were just horrific. The car was traveling at high speed, actively fleeing, pursuing paparazzi on motorcycles.
Exactly. Dodi Fade, her companion, and the driver, Henri Paul, who was the acting security manager of the Ritz Paris, were also killed instantly. Her bodyguard, Trevor Rees-Jones, part of the Fade family's protection team, was the sole survivor, though severely injured.
The public response was, well, it was like nothing anyone had ever seen before in modern British history, wasn't it?
Completely unprecedented. The sea of flowers, the messages, the sheer outpouring of collective grief outside Kensington Palace and Buckingham Palace. It transformed mourning into this massive, almost overwhelming national event. It triggered what many historians and commentators describe as a kind of constitutional crisis for the monarchy.
Because the royal family initially seemed so aloof, so cold in comparison to the public's profound sorrow.
Precisely. There was this huge disconnect. The public demanded a response, a recognition of Diana's unique place that the traditional royal protocols just weren't equipped to handle.
The funeral itself on September 6th was watched by an estimated 2.5 billion people worldwide, a truly global event. And it forced the monarchy into a massive historic shift in protocol, didn't it?
It really did, responding directly to public pressure and arguably Tony Blair's advice for the first time ever. The royal standard, the monarch's personal flag, was lowered to half-mast over Buckingham Palace on the day of the funeral. This set a completely new historic precedent for royal mourning protocol. It was a clear sign that the palace recognized the sheer magnitude of Diana's public identity and the depth of public feeling.
And at the funeral, her brother, Charles Spencer, delivered that devastatingly memorable tribute, didn't he? Famously saying she needed no royal title to continue to generate her particular brand of magic.
A powerful eulogy. He framed her death not just as a personal tragedy, but as a casualty, implicitly, of both the monarchy's rigidity and the media's relentless intrusion. It was quite pointed.
And the musical tribute was equally iconic, Elton John performing the rewritten Candle in the Wind, 1997.
Yes, originally about Marilyn Monroe, rewritten for Diana. It became the best-selling single of all time, with all the global proceeds channeled directly to the charitable causes Diana had championed through the Diana Princess of Wales Memorial Fund. A fitting tribute. She was later buried privately at Althorpe, the Spencer family estate, on a small island in the middle of a lake called the Round Oval, chosen specifically by her brother for absolute privacy and security, away from the crowds.
Of course, the dramatic circumstances of her death inevitably led to years of intense speculation, investigation, and numerous conspiracy theories.
Oh, inevitably. The initial French investigation concluded quite quickly that the primary cause was the driver, Henri Paul's, high level of intoxication, alcohol, and prescription drugs, combined with reckless driving at high speed while trying to evade the paparazzi.
But Dodi Fade's father, Mohammed Al-Fayed, never accepted that, did he?
No, he publicly and persistently maintained for years that the crash was not an accident but a planned murder, orchestrated by British intelligence services, MI6, possibly on the orders of the Duke of Edinburgh. He targeted both Diana and Dodi, he claimed, perhaps because Diana was pregnant with Dodi's child and planned to marry him, claims which were later disproven.
He accused MI6 and Prince Philip. Those are huge allegations.
Massive allegations. He pursued them relentlessly, funding private investigations and legal challenges. He eventually dropped the specific claims against Prince Philip and MI6, but the sheer scale of the global scrutiny meant these conspiracy theories persisted for years and still linger in some quarters.
But the final decisive conclusion came much later, from the massive multi-million-pound British inquest, Operation Paget, which reported in 2006, and a subsequent jury inquest in 2008.
That's right. After hearing from hundreds of witnesses over 6 months, the 2008 inquest jury returned a definitive verdict of unlawful killing. Crucially, though, this verdict attributed the cause equally to 2 factors: the grossly negligent driving of the chauffeur Henri Paul and the speed and manner of driving of the pursuing vehicles, the paparazzi.
So, shared blame. Both the driver's condition and actions and the media pursuit.
Exactly. It placed shared legal and moral blame squarely on the media intrusion that Diana had spent years trying, often ambivalently, to manage and escape.
And this brings us right back to the complex, deeply complex nature of her relationship with the media. She remains one of the most popular royal figures ever, doesn't she? Voted third, amazingly, in the BBC's poll, The 100 Greatest Britons, back in 2002, higher than most monarchs.
It's extraordinary. Tony Blair coined that phrase, the people's princess, in the hours after her death, and it stuck precisely because she felt relatable, accessible, warm, vulnerable qualities not typically associated with royalty.
Yet, her actual dance with the press was utterly ambivalent, as our sources confirm, and as her life showed. She complained bitterly, often justifiably, about the constant intrusion into her privacy.
But simultaneously, she absolutely leveraged the press, often brilliantly, for her own narrative control and to promote her causes. We know, for example, that she reportedly leaked that confidential directory of royal household phone numbers and addresses to the News of the World newspaper back in 1992.
Why did she do that?
Apparently, specifically to spite Charles and cause internal chaos within the palace structure during the height of their conflict, it was a calculated move.
That contradiction is just fascinating. Is her genius and maybe her flaw all rolled into one?
I think that's fair. Critics, then and now, often labeled her self-indulgent or manipulative because of these leaks, the panorama interview, the constant courting of attention, even while complaining about it.
But her admirers saw it differently.
Completely. Admirers, like her biographer Tina Brown, for instance, argued she was far from just a vulnerable victim. She was canny, she was resourceful, she actively learned how to use the massive media machine as a weapon, really, against the rigid establishment that she felt was trying to crush her.
She was also resourceful enough and smart enough to use fashion as a sophisticated tool, even a weapon. Diana remains one of Time magazine's all-time 100 fashion icons.
Deservedly so. Her style evolution was remarkable and, importantly, entirely deliberate. She went from those romantic, almost frilly, traditional Sloane Ranger looks in the early marriage years.
The shy die phase.
Exactly. To much bolder, more structured, businesslike, even glamorous outfits, particularly post-separation. And this wasn't just about looking good, it was strategic.
How so?
She consciously used her fashion choices to project strength, independence, and also very cleverly to direct attention away from her personal turmoil and towards her serious charity work. The clothes became part of the message.
We definitely remember the famous looks. That elegant off-the-shoulder velvet gown, the Travolta dress she wore when dancing with John Travolta at the White House.
A huge fashion moment. But perhaps the single most powerful fashion statement she ever made was that black, off-the-shoulder Christina Stambolian dress, the revenge dress.
Ah, yes, the revenge dress. Worn the very night Charles publicly admitted his adultery with Camilla in that Dembleby interview.
Precisely. That dress wasn't just clothing. It was a nonverbal act of defiant independence and glamour. It instantly launched her new, post-royal, confident image. It was bold, it was sleek, it was utterly commanding. It sent a crystal-clear message to the world and perhaps to the palace. She was moving on, and she was stronger than ever.
Her impact is just woven into the fabric of the modern monarchy and British public life, isn't it?
Undeniably. The Diana, Princess of Wales Memorial Fountain in Hyde Park, the Memorial Playground in Kensington Gardens, these stand as lasting public tributes in London. The Diana Award, established in 1999, continues her humanitarian mission by honoring young people who inspire positive change.
And perhaps most personally, her spirit lives on, quite literally, within the royal family itself, through her granddaughters. Princess Charlotte's full name is Charlotte Elizabeth Diana, and Prince Harry's daughter is Lilibet Diana.
Carrying her name forward, she introduced, I think, a vulnerability, a relatability, and certainly a campaigning spirit into royal life that simply cannot be erased, even if the institution has perhaps tried to contain it at times.
Her legacy is definitely complicated, multi-layered, but her methods, particularly in humanitarian work, were undeniably effective, weren't they?
Incredibly effective. She showed, perhaps more powerfully than anyone before or since, that global celebrity could be used as a blunt, powerful instrument for genuine humanitarian change. Even if, and this is key, even if it meant risking the right confrontation with both government and the monarchy itself.
Which brings us right back to that ultimate, maybe provocative question that her life, and especially her death, raises for us. Diana was famous, celebrated, for utilizing her enormous visibility for these global causes, and for explicitly rejecting the stifling royal protocol that came with her title. She went so far as to refuse official British police protection in her final years, believing it helped her distance herself from the royal family, gave her more freedom.
A freedom she craved.
So what does her singular, iconic, and ultimately tragic story suggest about the true cost? the personal cost, the psychological cost, maybe even the physical price of using that kind of intense global celebrity as a necessary tool for driving genuine humanitarian change.
It's a profound question, isn't it? It really hangs over her memory. It forces us, I think, to consider whether the immense good she undoubtedly did could possibly have been achieved without paying that ultimate terrible sacrifice for the very freedom and impact she sought. A difficult balance.
A very difficult balance indeed. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the complex life and the enduring legacy of Diana, Princess of Wales.
A fascinating figure. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.